Welcome to Saturday Simulcast, May 31st edition, the end of May. Hard to believe as we make our way into summer. It's starting to look like summer in central Indiana, sort of. I think the sun's finally going to come out. Been a kind of a gloomy May around here for the most part, but kind of up and down. But we look forward to a good show today. Tom Dienhart will join us. We'll talk right off the jump, talk a little Purdue football recruiting, that schedule, start times, that Friday night Black Friday game and Purdue bucket game, the first, I think it will be the first home night game. There have been the lights on when Purdue and Indiana have played, but it'll be the first night game and a first Friday night after Thanksgiving game in Ross-Ade Stadium. Hit some recruiting. Then Mark Montieth will join us. Recorded that a couple days ago, but the Purdue and Pacers connection. And Mark tells some great stories that I think you will enjoy if you're a student of Purdue basketball, dating back to the days of Billy Keller and Rick Mount and the Pacers, and that connection that Purdue has had dating back to the inception of the Indiana Pacers. And then Brian Neubert will join us for segment 3. We'll get a little bit caught up on Purdue basketball. So an action-packed show, if there's such a thing with that. I want to thank our sponsors, the Union Club Hotel, Boiler House Prime, that beautiful new restaurant at the Pete Dye Clubhouse. It is a great setting if you want to go there and have a little happy hour cocktail. It also has, by the way, you can go there for lunch and sit in the clubhouse, have lunch there as well, overlooking the Ackerman Allen golf course. Beautiful setting there, and I highly recommend it. All right, we're going to bring Mr. Dienhart in, and we'll have always enjoy that. Tom and I are having lunch later today, recording on Friday at Triple X, which is a good thing too. Get caught up. We'll solve all of West Lafayette's problems and relive that. But it's going to be. It is funny, and we kind of laugh and about this. The fact that it doesn't seem to stop. Big recruiting weekend this weekend for Coach Barry Odom. They'll start also in June with their camps as well. It's interesting, obviously Jet Goldsberry being one, but also I think of the 6 or 7 guys that you mentioned in boiling over, certainly an Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia connection. Really interesting to me that they're making those connections, but kind of an overview of what's going on. Let's start with Jet Goldsberry. Of course, we know his dad well from his days as a special teams extraordinaire player for Coach Joe Tiller, and a really good football player, but his son is highly, highly regarded. But a lot going on there with that.
Yeah, there is, Alan. He's really seen his recruiting profile raised the last couple months to the point where he's now one of the highest ranked recruits in the class of 2026 in Indiana, according to On3. So a nice collection of offers. He supposedly has this thing winnowed down to about 6 schools, North Carolina, Ole Miss, Rutgers, Wake, West Virginia, and Purdue for the number 3 overall prospect in Indiana, according to On3. And, Alan, from what I hear, I think he really would like to forge his own identity too. I'm sure he loves his dad and all, but I think sometimes, that's always the first line anytime you mention Jet Goldsberry.
Yeah.
And I think, part of him would like to, again, blaze his own trail. I'm not saying Purdue doesn't have a good chance. I think Purdue does have a good chance, but that's always something to be mindful of too, A guy who can play offense or defense, I think at this level, probably is a defensive back, a safety, and just a good young man too, if you ever get a chance to visit with him. So you're right, that's the kind of kid you'd like to get to Purdue for obvious reasons, for a number of reasons, right, Alan? And right now they've got 7 commitments in the class of 2026. They got the 7th last, I think it was on Memorial Day. Actually, right. Monday was January.
Just your luck.
I was sitting in the drive of Taco Bell with my wife and daughter. How about that?
You can't beat that.
James Bam Williams. By the way, that Taco Bell drive-thru is real slow, Alan. James Bam Williams, a big offensive lineman from Lawrence Central High School in Indianapolis. The 3rd offensive lineman of the 7 commitments already in this class. So a good start there, right? And we always talk about how you'd like to get those recruiting classes populated with in-state kids. I think it means more to the kids in Indiana. They're familiar with Purdue and Indiana and what football means to this state. So Jet would be a great one to get, and we shall see. And you're right, Alan. There's quite an array of players that are taking OVs this weekend as far as their where they're from. You mentioned Georgia, and Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama. So
Yeah.
quite an array. And again, we always know, Alan, there's a lot of talent in the South. You get beyond the Ohio River into Kentucky and Tennessee and that part of the country. A lot of good players, and this staff has some good connections. I know the defensive backs coach Clark's got a lot of connections in the South too. So, they're starting to turn over these stones, Alan. And I know they brought in 55 players from the portal. Crazy, right? But
Yeah.
Barry Odom told you and I that he wants the high school kids to be the foundation of this program. I think they'll get there at some point, but right now they're just trying to get the roster upgraded as quickly as they can. But again, at some point, I think we'll see this thing balance out. And again, high school recruiting is always going to be a big, big important factor for the staff.
One thing that's interesting, and I throwing more into this, is just the whole notion of the way the world is now. I don't. We can't speak to whether Purdue can fish some of those guys out of Southeast Conference, SEC territory, et cetera. But you're almost recruiting also to build relationships, because you don't know if a kid has a good visit and now and Purdue finishes second. Well, it used to be that that ship has sailed. You'll never see this guy again. Now there's got to be something to be said for, hey, let's make a good impression. We'd love to get some of these guys, I'm sure, but you never know. They go to a Georgia, they go to Florida, they go to Ole Miss, and it doesn't work out, and all of a sudden you've got a guy that and it seems like that's got to be some of the mix as guys turn to recruiting in 2025 and 2026.
Yeah, don't burn your bridges, right?
Right. Yeah.
Always part on good terms. Give the guy a handshake and wish him well. But heck, Alan, we've already seen that happen to Purdue with Nitro Tuggle.
Yeah.
The wide receiver from Georgia came to Purdue. He was a kid that Purdue recruited very hard under the previous staff. Didn't get him, obviously, right? And Marquise Easley, too, the huge offensive lineman from Kankakee, Illinois, who went to Georgia as well, Alan. He didn't come to Purdue, but again, I know they had him on campus here under the old staff too. So there's just 2 great examples right there, right? Guys who, even with the coaching change, but 2 players who were familiar with the university, familiar with the facilities, and got sold by the new staff, returned to West Lafayette, or all came to West Lafayette. So you're right, you never want to burn bridges. And just because you swing and miss on the front end with these guys doesn't mean you can't maybe get them a rebound in a year or 2.
All right, those start times that were announced, more of them, I should say, I think 5 out of the 6 were on Thursday. You had had some inside information about Indiana being that Black Friday game. Of course, surprised me a little bit, but just because because Mike Carmen talked about how USC might be a good game for Friday night. It's not going to be Friday night. It's going to be Saturday, September the 13th at 3:30 on CBS. But just your impressions. I mean, you had to weather the storm, so to speak, on a Thanksgiving Saturday night in that game that Purdue fans will forever want to erase from their memory down in Bloomington last year. Friday night, if you bundle up, it might be a good way to work off some of that Thanksgiving. I don't know if it's a good way to work off the dinner, but it is a good way to spend that weekend, and that will be in Ross-Ade Stadium when the Hoosiers and Boilermakers in Purdue has to, you would think, want at least a level of revenge or a level of respect when those 2 teams meet in November.
Can't have any was a tryptophan hangover, right?
Oh, I know.
It makes you
I think that's what happened to Purdue last year in that 66-0 deal. But again, if you're a Purdue fan, you don't ever want to mention that again. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I remember standing outside Memorial Stadium waiting to get in that night. Man, it was cold, Alan. Woof.
Was Derek on the sidelines that game too?
I think he was. Yeah. So
he didn't have enough mittens. Yeah.
He out there in his parka all night and witnessed that bludgeoning. But Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. A Black Friday night. Why not, Alan Karpick? Why
Yeah.
not? Be a more of a standalone game. Don't get caught in the clutter of Saturday when there's going to be a litany of big games played on the 29th, I guess it is. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, you're going to have, like I said, a pretty prominent stage on Friday night after Thanksgiving. Can Purdue take advantage of that? That's the big question, Alan. What will be at stake for the Boilermakers by the time we get that late in the year, by the time you've got all your leaves raked up and all your Christmas shopping done, right? So that's what's going to be fascinating. What's IU going to look like, too, of course, the
Yeah, no doubt.
down south. Unfortunately for Purdue fans, are big once again. They're going to be a preseason top 25 team. We all know 11-2 last year. All the Kurt Signetti stuff. But again, great opportunity for Purdue. And I've got no earthly idea, Alan, what Purdue's going to look like on August 30th or what they're going to look like, let alone on November 28th. So, but again, why not? I think fans could be stoked up about it. They always seem to like night games, day after Thanksgiving. But again, a lot of them, Al, may depend on what Purdue's shape is. Are they what 2-9? Are they
Yeah.
Are they 3-8 coming into that game? Maybe that will really impact the size of crowd they get. So it's going to be fascinating. And Alan, as you probably noted, this will only be the second time Purdue's played Indiana on a Friday. And of course, the other time, right?
Still watching Mike Allstott run with that 264 yards or whatever he had in that game, and Jim Coletto, and I know that was mutual. Supposedly, he was 12 yards short of the record, and about a half a quarter to go. Otis Armstrong's record, which still stands, 276 yards against Indiana as well. But yeah, what a performance on that Black Friday afternoon in Bloomington.
And Alan, we've got one other night game was announced. Of course, the second game of the year, Southern Illinois on a Saturday. September 6th will be a BTN night game. And of course, Ball State's going to be at noon. We learned, we already knew about the game at Notre Dame being at 3:30. The game in Minnesota, Alan, 7 or 7:30 p.m. We don't know the TV network, but that's going to be a night game up there in the Twin Cities. Boy, I remember being up there in 2020 for a night game.
Yeah. Payne Durham.
The Phantom offensive pass interference call. And then, of course, Rutgers on October 25th will be homecoming at noon. We don't know the TV there. So, Alan, man, I tell you what, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights have been a pain in Purdue's backside. Purdue's 0-2 again. Purdue's 0-2 all time against Rutgers, both occurring, since they joined the conference in 2014. But of course, Jeff Brom took his first team out to Piscataway and lost a tough game. I remember watching that one on TV. And then it was during the pandemic, not far from where I talked to you, Alan. During the pandemic, Greg Schiano brought his Scarlet Knights here. I think it was 37-30. I think they ran a kickoff back for a touchdown. Just a tough loss. It was a really tough season for Purdue.
Yeah, could not stop the quarterback run in that game.
Yeah, that's right.
Rutgers just ran all over. That was a bitter loss, and certainly the loss in 2017. With Purdue, Rutgers wasn't good. Purdue had already shown some real signs, winning at Missouri, and then laid an egg in that game. It was not one of Jeff Brom's favorite moments, certainly in West Lafayette. And it's interesting. I do like the schedule. And it's for my own personal convenience. I'll be honest with that. I like the idea on Labor Day weekend you play at noon. That's okay. And then I like that second game being at night because you're playing Southern Illinois and you need a reason to keep people. Like you said, night games are, especially when the weather should be warm. There's some buzz, and you need a little buzz when you're playing Southern Illinois. I don't expect to have crowds like we saw last year where you're going to be looking at capacity, though we don't know that yet, certainly. But they're going to be good crowds, and that certainly isn't going to hurt. Students it gives students an extra reason to be there. I like that schedule from that standpoint. And then coming back and playing USC at 3:30 on CBS. Purdue, that will be if Purdue can beat 2-0, there'll be some hype about that game. No matter where Purdue, Purdue may not be predicted to win another game after its first two this year, but there'll be some buzz about that game because Lincoln Riley is kind of on the hot seat or they can't come in here and lose to Purdue if they're going to achieve the goals that the Trojans want to achieve. And yet Purdue could really make a big step forward, one would think, if you win those first two games and then you pull what would be an upset against USC, but an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I think we saw an early line on the Ball State game.
Yeah.
I think Purdue was given 16 points, but now I jumped to the USC game. USC, then they go to Notre Dame back-to-back weekends. How about that?
Yeah.
Welcome to West Lafayette, Barry Odom. And you and I talked about the only time USC's been in West Lafayette. I was in like 5th grade, 5th or 6th,
right,
1976. It was John Robinson was the head coach in 1976. John McKay had left to coach the expansion Buccaneers. Ricky Bell was the running back, of course. Man, I tell you what, Alan, when those type of name brand schools hit West Lafayette, it's really cool. It's going to be cool this year too. The USC Trojans are coming to West Lafayette. That's going to be great theater, great fun just to see those uniforms and that helmet in Ross-Ade Stadium.
Yeah, Vince Evans, the quarterback, who went on to play with the Bears, right, a little bit, and it was a big deal. Purdue and under Alex Agassi, USC controlled that game. Though Purdue was in the game a little bit early, but I think the Trojans walk away with a 31-13.
Yeah,
I always remember that one because it was rainy, and yet, like you, because we grew up in West Lafayette, it was cool to see. Well, man, I'm never going to see that USC uniform. Of course, the days of John McKay and dating back to the national championships that the Trojans had, and of course, John Robinson. That program didn't fall at all really during his time there. It was a big deal. That's part of the fun. It'll be fun when UCLA comes here, which would be next year. I don't know how that's scheduled.
It is.
And of course, we remember Freeman McNeil in 1980, and a very good Purdue team got not boat race, but beat pretty soundly by UCLA. UCLA dominated Purdue. Purdue has not been able to beat UCLA as well. So it's going to be some fun reliving some old time Purdue football games from that standpoint. All right, go ahead, Tom.
Real quick, too, on the schedule note, we talked about back-to-back USC at Notre Dame. Or Allen, November at Michigan, Ohio State, at Washington, Indiana. And I tell you what, the month they got to make their hay, we know they got to start 2-0. That's a given. The month they got to make their hay is in October with Illinois, at Minnesota, at Northwestern, Rutgers. That's not USC, Alabama, Penn State, and Texas. Those are 4 schools. They are good schools. They're solid programs, but those are 4 schools. You think that even a Purdue program in transition, if you will, would have a chance to stand shoulder to shoulder with a good chance to win a couple of them.
Yeah, Brett Bielema's team, though, going to be preseason top 15, top 10 maybe. It's going to be a big challenge. But, yes, I would agree with you on that. Those are games that Purdue's got to be able to find. You're going to have to – this is program. This is not a knock. You're going to have to win the games against your peer schools and hope you can – pull an upset or two. And I'm talking about overtime. I'm not necessarily talking about 2025, but when you play the Ohio State, I mean, this is the same old story, and you got to find a way to sneak one of those in from time to time. But it's, Barry Odom doesn't seem to be backing down from the challenge. He shouldn't, and we'll see. And gosh, that's what I said, in this wonderful world of FanDuel and all the gambling that goes on in sports, I have no idea. 16.5 points, Ball State. Does that make any sense? I don't know. Who knows? It's a coin toss, and the Cardinals will come in here and think they can win, I would think, in that week 1, just because Purdue's in that state of flux. So I have to ask you one question. Robin and Veronica and Tom, what did you eat? What do you guys eat? Because our kids are a little bit older than you, Reed and Haley, but they love, especially Reed, loves Taco Bell. Why do they love Taco Bell? Two, what do you get? Were you just going in for a snack, or are you going in for a full-time meal?
Yeah, my son Cal stayed back home, of course, here. Forest Hill Drive while we went to get it. So,
yes, that's how they usually operate with those sons.
I don't know.
They're wealth maximizers.
Been like that for years. The Nacho Bel Grande, really anything. I mean, I'll admit I'm even a sucker for some of that Taco Bell food as well. I didn't get anything this time, Alan Karpick,
All
and
right.
I'm trying to watch what I eat.
You've got that girlish figure. You're in good shape, man. Your
I'm
weight's
stay.
never been a problem for you,
I always save my calories for the Dwayne Purpose All American Burger.
which we will be doing here in a little bit of time. So, all right, Tom, thanks so much as always. We love your coverage. It's a privilege to see your work on our site. And it's been, gosh, since 2019 you've been doing this. I posted something here on the front of this interview that you've been covering Purdue football. And it's really true. Yeah, since the 80s, in one form or another.
Yeah.
Obviously, your days with Host Communications, Sporting News, Rivals, BTN, it's all been part of that. Purdue's always been in the back of your mind, that's for sure. And that's what happens when you grow up. You go to the school and grow up in town here. You remember Ricky Bell and you remember those days, and that's part of the fun of all this. So, all right, we will, and that hair thing. But
I kept the same hairstyle. I've kept the and it was that style, Alan.
Yeah, that's what's a good thing. All right, we will make a short transition as a word Tom used earlier, and Mark Montieth will join us. Have some fun talking about the Purdue and Pacers connection and that history. Mark tells some great stories. It'll be a lot of fun with that. And then if we can get him on the show, we'll have Brian Neubert join us in the last segment for Saturday Simulcast. Thanks again, Tom.
Thank you, buddy.
I am joined by Mark Montieth. He was at GoldandBlack or working around GoldandBlack long before I did. Right? Actually, technically the same year because I did do some work for GoldandBlack back in their early days. But Mark is the author of Passion Play and also a book on the Indiana Pacers called Reborn. We'll get into that a little bit. But the topic of the day is Purdue and the Pacers. And obviously the Pacers are in central Indiana and really around the country have putting on quite a show. By the time you watch or listen to this, maybe the series may be done. They may be going to Game 6 or 7. Who knows? But really been an interesting story. And Mark, thanks for taking the time with us today.
Always good to be with you, Alan.
Well, Mark, we'll start with that whole notion of Purdue's connection to the Pacers, and I think as you brought up initially that this is goes really all the way back to the formation of the Pacers, and you've written in a book called Reborn, really an excellent book on the start on how basketball was brought back to the state of to professional basketball brought back to Indianapolis. But talk about that because there's a huge Lafayette connection with that. Not technically a Purdue one, maybe, but it is a great Lafayette one.
Yeah, the Pacers really were born in Lafayette. There was an annual dinner at the Lafayette Country Club, a big game dinner where they would serve elk and boar and various exotic meats. And I'm guessing there was some alcohol served as well at this gathering. But there's an annual thing, and Bob Collins, who was the sports editor of the Star, would always go to it. And we're talking 1967 now.
Right.
And so they're having dinner up there, and Collins is telling these guys, these Lafayette businessmen, about the effort to start a new league. And it wasn't really called the ABA yet. It wasn't official, but there was an effort to start a new professional league. And the entry fee was very reasonable. And there was a meeting coming up in New York to get started. And it only cost something like $6,000 to put dibs down on a franchise. And these guys are sitting around a table and it's like, hey, let's do it. Yeah. And everybody puts in $1,000 to the best of my knowledge. Collins did not put in money. He was, again, the sports editor of the Star and couldn't be participating in that. But Joe Bannon went to New York City. Joe was the president of the Lafayette Bank, and he brought the money. And there are photos of him at that inaugural meeting. And that's how it all started. Of course, it took a lot more than that. You had to put up a lot more money later on to have a franchise, but that was putting dibs down on a franchise. And that all came from that dinner at the Lafayette Country Club.
Yeah, and of course, Joe Bannon, though, again, certainly as a Purdue benefactor, was involved, obviously, as a supporter of Purdue sports over the years. And Burr Sweezy might have been in that group. I can't remember, but it was interesting. Is there any other names? I was just thinking any other Lafayette names that you could remember?
Yeah, Dick Ebershoff was a part of that group, and Lynn Treese was a part of that group. And Lynn Treese had a huge role with the Pacers later because he's the one. He owned Burger Chef franchises, among other things, but he was like the one owner. And the Pacers' original ownership group was, it varied, but half a dozen guys who would put up money here and there to keep the thing going. And Lynn Treese was the one guy when the opportunity presented itself to trade for Mel Daniels after the first ABA season. The Minnesota franchise, Mel was Rookie of the Year in Minnesota, and that franchise was moving to Miami. And they didn't care about what the fans of Minneapolis thought. They were moving, and the fans of Miami didn't know anything about the team yet. So they sold Mel Daniels to the Pacers for $100,000 and two players who would never play again, Jimmy Dawson from Illinois and Ron Kozlicki from Northwestern. And Lynn Treese is the guy who had enough financial wherewithal to put up a note to guarantee that $100,000. And that's how the Pacers got Mel Daniels. And, of course, he's now in the Naismith Hall of Fame. Yeah. And you could argue that if not for that deal, the Pacers could have folded. Because they were just a very average team and were not drawing well that first year. And if you don't bring in Mel Daniels, you're never going to win a championship. And if you don't do that, the Pacers might have folded after 2 or 3 years. And if the Pacers folded, the ABA probably folded. So that effort by Lynn Treese in many ways saved the Pacers and saved the ABA.
Yeah. Dick Ebershoff, kind of Purdue, but part of the Purdue. He was NIL at Purdue before NIL. Right?
That's right. I got a chance to talk with Dick. I really wish I had done this early enough to talk to Joe Bannon and some of these other guys, but I did get a chance to talk to Ebershoff before a Purdue football game one year when I went up. And I talked to Lynn Treese's son, but he didn't know much or have any papers or anything. But it would have been great to be able to talk to these guys who were in on it from the very beginning, because it had to be a wild ride.
Yeah, Dick Ebershoff, and of course his son Henry played basketball for Purdue when George King's first couple of years as a head coach, and Lafayette Tent and Awning. And of course, Lynn Treese Boys Clubs. These are household names, or long remembered names, I should say, in the city of Lafayette. Of course, Joe Bannon as well. All right, Mark, let's talk about some of the guys that in Purdue's history with the Pacers, which is really certainly not totally, but it seemed to be most marked by two guys, Billy Keller and Rick Mount. Now we'll get into Brad Miller, and of course I'm skipping over Jerry Seasteen. There are four guys that have played, but let's talk about Mount and Keller, because that was the early part. Of course, Keller 1 year ahead of Mount gets drafted. I think he was drafted, but he made the team. And of course, he was always. The story I always heard was, well, he's going to get threatened to be cut every year, and he made the team every year, and of course played till 1976, and then it was unceremoniously cut the night before they had an exhibition game, I think, at Purdue. Yeah. Talk about those two guys, though, because Mount's path, he was $1 million bonus baby, so to speak, signed early, but it did not work out near as well for him. Tell a little bit about that story. There's a lot to unravel there.
Yeah, well, Billy Keller was drafted by the Pacers. It's unclear exactly where, because the ABA did not reveal every round of the draft, right, other than the first round. They just didn't want guys to know where they were drafted. But Billy was about a 6th round pick and was not expected to make the team. The Pacers made a deliberate attempt to draft big guards in 1969. They're coming off of their second season. And they had a very promising second season, got to the ABA finals. And they wanted a big guard to go with Freddie Lewis in the backcourt. And they took Keller like in the 6th round. And Bob Collins took credit for that. He claims, now Bob was known to stretch the truth a bit, I think, but he claims, he told me directly that he told Mike Storn, the Pacers' original general manager, that, hey, Mike, did you realize you're going to draft Billy Keller? And Storn said, I don't know. He's awfully short. I don't think he could make it. Bob said, no, you're going to draft Billy Keller. Well, they did around the 6th round. He also got drafted by Milwaukee in the
Right.
NBA, and he went up there and talked with them. But he thought the Pacers presented the best opportunity to make the team. And the thing that really helped him, he played on a U.S. team that traveled throughout Europe that summer after his senior year at Purdue. And so he reports to training camp, to rookie camp, in shape. So he's winning all the sprints, and he's playing well and shooting well because he's in shape. And he makes the team. He played really well in preseason games, made the team, had some real moments as a rookie where he showed what he could do. And as you mentioned, he lasted all the way to 1976. He's one of 4 guys who played on all 3 of the Pacer ABA championship teams. So had a great career, as popular a player as the Pacers have ever had. Great 3-point shooter, great shooter, period. And really, you talk to guys who played with and against him, and they will tell you he was a competitor. He really went at it. Everybody who knows Billy Keller thinks of him, what a great guy, what a nice guy. But as a player, was a real competitor, and everybody will tell you the same thing. So he had a great career there with the Pacers. You mentioned unceremoniously cut. It's an amazing thing how it ended for him. He had a knee injury and sat out a year and rehabbed, and he wanted to play a year in the NBA. The Pacers had joined the NBA in 1976, and Billy got in shape, he got another tryout. He doesn't have a guaranteed contract. He's playing well, shooting exceptionally well in training camp. And the Pacers had scheduled a preseason game against the Bulls at Mackey Arena. Of course, Billy's the big attraction there, and they sell a lot of tickets. And everybody's excited about Billy Keller coming back to Mackey Arena. And they cut him the night before the game.
I
And
was one of them, Mark. I was there.
That.
What the heck?
Made no sense whatsoever. I read the Lafayette, the Journal and Courier. They ripped the Pacers for it.
Yeah.
It made no sense. Billy's still mad about it. I don't blame him. And I guess you could say and really the guy they kept instead of Billy, a guy named Bobby Wilson, lasted about a month.
Yeah.
And then you cut him. I mean, it would not have hurt to have Billy Keller on that team on the bench playing spot minutes, at least for a while. But that was, hey, I've learned over the years that pro basketball is a hard thing to get out of gracefully. Most players get cut and do not leave on their own terms. The Reggie Miller exit of a Bentley and a standing ovation and a big ceremony
doesn't happen very often.
It's not the norm. Not the norm. Rick Mount, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. Rick signed his Pacer contract 2 days after his last game at Purdue.
Right.
So you think there might have been some conversations going on during the season. Rick's last game was against Minnesota at Mackey Arena on a Saturday. Monday night, he is at the Channel 13 studios in Indianapolis signing his contract live. They preempted the local news at 11 o'clock and had a Rick Mount contract signing ceremony with the Pacers. And it was huge. I mean, Rick Mount, a 3-time All-American, as popular a player as ever come out of the state of Indiana. And he's signing on with the Pacers, who had just won their first ABA championship. It seemed like too good to be true. As most people know, the career there did not work out as he had hoped. He was with them 2 seasons, had a lot of really good games. Some people will say he's a bust. He had a lot of really good games, 28 points here, 22 points there, whatever. Slick Leonard did not want him in the first place, not his kind of guy. I think kind of resented his popularity. Did not go to that press conference at Channel 13. Claimed he had a bad cold. I don't know if he did or not. Some people are skeptical of that, but was not at that press conference. Rick got injured in rookie camp. It is, things just didn't come together for him with the Pacers, although he was on their championship team in 1972 and made a lot of contributions, started a lot of games, but wound up asking for a trade during the ABA finals, and that wish was granted the following summer. He just had a hard luck career. He played 5 years, played really well at times, got hurt here and there, started on Kentucky's team that the Pacers beat in the 73 finals, played really well in Memphis, then got hurt down there, broke a collarbone because he got knocked down on a breakaway layup. but he was leading the ABA in three-point shooting early in that year. So he, had a better pro career than most people give him credit for. Just had a lot of bad luck with injuries. And after 5 years, walked out on his own terms, and he was in the Pacer training camp. He was a free agent. He was brought back. Slick Leonard, I think, felt a little guilty and brought him back to training camp. But after a day or two, just decided his heart wasn't in it anymore and walked out of camp. And that was the end of his professional career.
Didn't Houston also, the Rockets, make a big push for him? I can't remember the whole story there, and you probably know
They
that
sure
well.
did. Yes, they did. When the NBA brought in the three-point shot, Rick had been retired a few years, but was still 30, 31 years old. And Tom Nasaki, who had coached Rick with Utah, was coaching the Houston Rockets, and they had Moses Malone, and they said, Rick, just come down here, play off the bench. And when they double team Moses, we'll kick it out to you and you knock down shots. And pretty good gig. And they were going to offer a very nice contract. And Rick agreed to do it. But when it came time to get on that plane and go to Houston, he realized his heart still wasn't in it. He just didn't want the lifestyle of the pro athlete, all the flights, being gone all the time. He was comfortable being back in Lebanon. So he did have an opportunity to rejoin pro basketball, sign with the Houston Rockets and play in the NBA, but ultimately turned it down.
Yeah, fascinating, because there's a lot to that story. And I just finished the book written by John Feinstein about the punch with Rudy Tomjanovich and Kermit Washington, and of course Tom Nasaki. And Mount would have been in that time frame, maybe a little bit later, as you mentioned, but really an interesting book by John, and some person that we mourn his passing too early, the guy that you knew well as well. Yeah, an interesting thing about Mount, and I have the ability to pull this up on the internet. It's averaged 17 points a game in his last year at Memphis. I mean, he only played 26 games. But you're right, and in his last year with the Pacers, averaged 14.3, and went to Kentucky and averaged almost 15 points a game on that Kentucky team that you're right, the Pacers beat in the finals, as I recall. So interesting stuff. All right, and then we'll take us next to Jerry Seasting, and great story in terms of how Jerry got there. Of course, Jerry from Martinsville, Indiana. Was really part of, you could argue, maybe the best Purdue backcourt of all time, when you had Jerry Seasting, Kyle Macy, Eugene Parker, and Bruce Parkinson all on the same team. Of course, Kyle Macy left after.
Too many guards, many good players.
Left after his freshman year, goes to Kentucky, wins the national championship. And Jerry Seasting has to really work his way to get to the Pacers, and then really has an excellent, certainly a solid NBA career. But tell us that story, because it's an interesting one.
Yeah, Jerry was drafted either third or fourth round by Golden State in the NBA, and tried out, did not make it. So he's back in Indianapolis selling sporting goods. He's in the real world and playing pickup ball, that kind of thing. But the Pacers, and let's see, this would have been the summer of 1980.
Right.
Had an open tryout out at Butler Fieldhouse, Hinkle Fieldhouse, and Jerry participated in that. Really, the purpose, according to Jerry, was, Jack McKinney had coached the Lakers and had a bicycle accident where he had a really serious head injury, and he'd been out of coaching for a couple of years. So Jerry thinks that they just wanted to get Jack McKinney kind of back into coaching gradually and have a tryout camp and look over some talent, that kind of thing. So Jerry tried out and was by far the best player in that tryout. And they cut that thing off after a couple of days and told Jerry, come back for training camp. He made the team. The Pacers were not good. That helped his cause. They had openings. And he did make the team. I was working in Fort Wayne then for the Journal-Gazette, and remember a guy coming in the newsroom one day, a local guy up there who a lot of people knew, and he followed basketball. And he said, man, did you hear Jerry Seasting made the Pacers? Can you imagine how bad they must be, for him to make that team? Well, it turned out he got better and better, and became a really solid player, and winds up, playing for the Boston Celtics and winning rings. I didn't know this until fairly recently. He was a free agent. He wrote a letter to Red Auerbach, or called him, maybe called him, and said, "Hey, you can, you need me. I can make your team. I can make you better. You need a guy like me." And Auerbach took him up on it, and they signed him. And he is probably best known as the Celtic for that fight that he had with Ralph Sampson. But he was a contributor to a championship team out there. I guess that would have been in 1986. Right. He had a lengthy NBA playing career and had a long coaching career as an assistant coach in the NBA. And now, I assume, happily retired in Florida. Certainly retired.
Yeah, he's happily retired as far as I know. And really, one of the toughest-minded guys you're ever going to find. I mean, Billy Keller and him. Keller maybe a better long-range shooter, obviously, but Jerry Seasting was just a tough-minded guy. Played 5 years with the Pacers. Worked his way into a starter, averaging over 30 minutes a game his last 2 years there. The 86 Celtics, he averaged 20 minutes a game there. He's always on that video of Isaiah. I think it's with the in 88 with when they steal the ball, when Bird steals the ball and Jerry Seasting is jumping up and down, number 12. But he ended up playing with the Celtics to 88, then didn't play as much as last, had some injury. I don't know if he had injury issues or just,
I think he did.
But played with the Trailblazers, the Hornets, and ended up with one game with the Milwaukee Bucks in his last year. But really a quality basketball guy. And really when the Pacers were as bad as you could get, I mean, almost as bad.
22 wins. They had a 22-win season, 26-win season, and they were terrible.
Yeah, and I can remember though when Jerry and they were just Vern Fleming and those guys beating Larry Bird, with a bad Pacer team beating Larry Bird in Market Square Arena and actually being at that game. But Jerry was fun to watch. All right, Everett Stevens, the next one comes up. Very short stint, was not drafted by the Pacers. He was drafted after the Purdue 88 season, a season like no other. Gets a chance to get traded gets traded, I guess it is, to the Pacers at a very short season. But he and Troy Lewis were actually in that camp. If our calendars are right, at the same time, though, Lewis was a free agent and was cut. But tell us that story about Everett and obviously his only real year that he got a chance to play in the league.
Yeah, the Pacers went after Everett. He had been drafted by Philly, and I can't recall exactly who they traded to get him, but they wanted Everett Stevens, an athletic guy who had finished a great career at Purdue as a senior, and so he was with them the whole year. Did not play a lot. I remember one home game that I attended, and he started the second half, and it surprised him. George Irvin was the coach, and he started Everett the second half and kind of caught him off guard. Everett, wasn't quite cut out for the NBA. He later had a 10-day contract with Milwaukee.
Right, yeah.
He had like a 10-year career in Australia. So he had a nice pro career, made a good living doing that for a decade, but didn't quite make it with the Pacers. You just have to have a certain level of athleticism and everything. There's a whole package that comes with being a successful NBA player. And maybe if Everett had been in a different situation, maybe if he'd been on a team like Jerry Seasting was, and a bad team where he got a chance to play more, he could have worked his way into it. But it didn't work out with the Pacers or Milwaukee or anyone else. But still, played a decade of pro basketball. That's a great thing in itself. And Troy, I remember Troy being in Pacer camp when they were training at Purdue up at Mackey Arena. I have a memory of him scoring over Reggie Miller. Reggie was coming off his rookie year, but they released Troy that same day. And I'm sitting in the stands watching this workout, watching Troy, having just, seen his senior season at Purdue, from a very close perspective. And they're running sprints. And the Pacer PR guy came up and told us, hey, after practice today, we're going to cut so-and-so and so-and-so and Troy Lewis. And I'm watching Troy run sprints knowing he's going to get cut in a few minutes. I felt like going down there and telling him, like, Troy, don't get off the floor here. You're wasting your energy here. It was a sad thing, but Troy, played in the what they called then the Continental Basketball Association, and is doing well now over in Ohio, but not quite athletic enough to play at that level, but very close. I know he had a tryout with Larry Brown in San Antonio as well. But you got to be in the right place at the right time. Unless you're just a super talent, you got to be in the right place at the right time. Rick Mount was not with the Pacers. Billy Keller was. Different timing. Jerry Seasting was. Troy Lewis was not. Nor Everett Stevens. So for a lot of guys, there's a lot of borderline guys, and you've got to be in the right situation to make it.
Yeah, no question. Really interesting, and not a better dude than Troy Lewis, and a terrific two-time All Big Ten level player at Purdue, and of course that book that Mark wrote. If you're a Purdue basketball fan, you know the book Passion Play. You can still get it on Amazon as well, and it's a great chronicling of the 87-88 season and Coach Gene Katie's team that got to the Sweet 16. I'll still never remember the look on your face walking to that press conference. I was working the athletic department. I said, I felt bad. I felt you couldn't help but feel bad for Purdue and Gene Katie, but I felt bad for you because that book was terrific. It's still a great book and a story of a great season. Some really great, interesting personalities, Mel McCants and others in that book as well. All right, Brad Miller, probably, though his stint with the Pacers was the shortest, not the shortest, but it wasn't long, I should say. But not arguably, he was the most successful because, as we talked before this recording, they made the NBA All-Star team, came over to the Pacers for part of their season from the Bulls, then plays a full season, I believe it was, in 2002-03 with the Pacers. Brad Miller, another guy that I think was undrafted, if I'm right.
Which is unbelievable to me.
Yeah, and such a terrific pro. I mean, without question, an NBA All-Star level guy. But talk about that experience, because it came down to after 2003 that the Pacers still wanted to keep him there, but they couldn't because the bidding got too high for Brad.
Yeah, the Pacers acquired Brad Miller in what's the biggest trade in franchise history by volume. They traded Jalen Rose, Travis Best, and a guy named Norm Richardson. And I think maybe a second round. There might have been a draft pick in there. In return, they got Brad Miller, Ron Artest, Ron Mercer, and Kevin Ollie. Yeah. And those are four good players. That trade actually was the brainchild of Sam Smith, a sports writer at the Chicago Tribune, who was close friends with the Bulls owner, Jerry Reinsdorf. The Bulls had, Brad's starting for Chicago, but they have two young centers, Tyson Chandler and Curry, two guys who have been drafted first round who needed to play. And the Bulls weren't any good, and they felt they were wasting their time with these guys sitting on the bench not playing that much. So they wanted to move Brad Miller, and the Pacers needed a center because Jermaine O'Neal was their center, but he didn't want to play it. He wanted to be a forward, and probably his better position. So that trade, as Ron Artest became the best-known player out of that deal, but that trade revolved around Brad Miller. The Pacers wanted a center, and Artest was kind of a throw-in. He was acting up in Chicago some, and they were kind of looking to get rid of him. But the Pacers they made that deal for Brad Miller. Everybody else was kind of a throw-in, and we'll see how it turns out. And he became an all-star. The following year, when Isaiah Thomas was the coach, Brad Miller was an all-star, played in the all-star game along with Jermaine O'Neal. And Brad had such good hand-eye coordination, great shooter, great passer, physical, could take the pounding around the basket, could dish it out. I don't think he loved basketball. No. He didn't have the work ethic that some guys have, but he was so good. He played, a decade of NBA basketball for a handful of teams and made a whole lot of money. The Pacers wanted to keep him after his all-star season, but the bidding for him as a free agent, like Brad himself said, it went crazy. Yeah. It was a huge surprise to him. And the Pacers simply could not afford to keep him. They were willing to pay him like $60 or $70 million, but he got like 120 from Sacramento. And Brad didn't want to leave, and they didn't want to get rid of him, but they couldn't afford that $120 million or whatever it was. So they worked out a sign and trade, and they got Scott Pollard in return. And they weren't claiming that was an even trade, but they needed to get a backup center. And they got a few other things thrown in there as well. Scott Pollard still lives in Indianapolis and is pretty well known down there. He was a good, solid NBA player with a long career, but not an all-star like Brad Miller was. And Brad, I know, liked it out in Sacramento, played a couple other places as well, and living happily ever after to this day. But was an all-star with the Pacers that one season.
Yeah, we had a chance. Brad's showing up in Mackey Arena, as are a lot of people these days. They like to come down and see these top 5 ranked teams that Matt Painter's put up, at least will this year and did a couple of years ago as well. Yeah, Miller, 14 years technically in the NBA. That's incredible. Though he ended up his career only playing in 2012, but an amazing career. We know the interesting thing about Miller, and it's been well documented. He was like a 5'11" guard until he was a junior in high school. So he could really handle the basketball. And for a guy as big as he is, and that's what's interesting. So, all right. And the Knicks, of the teams that are still left as of this recording, the Knicks, the Timberwolves, and of course, OKC, that Purdue, I think Rob Hummel obviously played for the Timberwolves. Miller ended up his career at the Timberwolves. The Purdue and the Knicks really don't have any history that I could find. Joe Sexton drafted in 1956, never played there. Of course, the former Purdue assistant basketball coach and one of the great athletes in the history of the city of Indianapolis, from Arsenal Tech in 1952, I believe it was. And then, of course, Bob Ford. But Bob played briefly in the ABA, a couple games, a long-time Purdue announcer, Hall of Fame member, was drafted by the Knicks. And again, that was also still in that day of the ABA NBA draft at that point in time, but never had a chance. But again, Rob Hummel, we know, did have a cup of coffee, so to speak, as he reminds people every time you hear him with the Timberwolves. Again, Purdue and the Pacers, what a great relationship. Anything else you want to add to the fray that we didn't bring up, because you've got such a wealth of knowledge on this, and maybe talk a little bit, because you're still working on another book with the Pacers, correct? Is that still in process? Or
Well, yeah, I want to do a follow-up to Reborn. Reborn covers the formation of the franchise in the first 2 seasons, how they got off the ground, and I want to do something on the championship seasons, the ABA championship seasons, and that core of players, and really their lives after basketball as well.
Yeah.
So I've spent a lot of time talking with Billy Keller, Rick Mount, other guys from the Darnell Hillman, other guys from those teams, and got a lot of great information. Just need to put it all together.
All you have is time, right? It takes just a couple of minutes to write a book. Mark, thanks so much for your time. It's great stuff, and maybe this will be the year. It's hard to argue right now where the Pacers are. Be their first title since 1973, when in the ABA days, right? And still got some work to do, at least as of this recording, and it will not be a cakewalk. It never is in the finals as well, but they sure are fun to watch. Give us a view of what you think their chances are heading down the stretch here, looking like they're going to face Oklahoma City as well.
Yeah, as we're talking, they lead the Knicks 3-1. That means they have 3 chances to win 1 game. And if you can't do that, obviously you don't deserve to be in the finals, but they look really good. So certainly should be in the finals for the second time in the NBA.
Yeah.
First since 2000. And Oklahoma City will be there from the West, and Oklahoma City will be the favorite in the finals. They had the best record during the regular season. But I would expect it to be a really good series. When the Pacers played the Lakers in 2000, I was covering the Pacers for the Indianapolis Star, and I never felt the Pacers could win that series. The Lakers had Shaq in his prime, and Kobe Bryant was entering his prime, and the Pacers had nobody like that, nobody who could match up. Rick Smith was in his last year. The Pacers were an aging team. I just never felt the Pacers had a chance to win that series, and I thought they acquitted themselves well. They went 6 games and were in They got blown out the first half of game one because they arrived at the arena late. The bus got caught in traffic, and their whole pregame routine was screwed up. Really, from the second half of game one on, they were in every game, every half, and played well, and kind of got homered really in game 6 out in LA. But so I thought they did well. They just didn't have the talent or the bulk, the size, the physicality that the Lakers had. This would be a more competitive series, I think. It was Pacers and OKC. I think OKC will be the favorite, but not by much, not by a lot. And actually, the Pacers probably have more playoff experience than OKC does, and that means something. So it would not shock me if the Pacers win the championship.
Yeah, going to be interesting. It'll be they're going crazy already right now in Indianapolis, and that ticket prices are out of this world. For those of us that would like to, well, let's go try to go to one of those games. It's out of past my pay grade, but a lot of fun to watch on TV. Mark, thanks so much for your time. Always interesting stuff, and a subject that you know as well as anybody. Look for the book "Reborn: The Pacers and the Return of Pro Basketball in Indianapolis." Look out for the next book, because Mark will have it done next week. No, he won't have it done next week, but he will. He is working on it. I know how hard he's working on it as well, and that will be a must read if you like the history of basketball in the state of Indiana, but also for obviously the Indiana Pacers. So have a great rest of your day, Mark. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Brian Neubert will join us in a second for GoldandBlack.com Saturday Simulcast. I'm Alan Karpick. Again, just a reminder to you, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And of course, you can leave a positive review and check out all of our work for not only Gold and Black radio listeners, which is our Tuesday program, but also, of course, our GoldandBlack.com Saturday Simulcast. You can use promo code PU1 at checkout when purchasing a monthly subscription, because there's a lot of good content that Tom Dienhart and Brian Neubert put together. Well worth reading. Our message board, certainly that as well. If you want to be part of a really good community, you should join us at GoldandBlack.com. But you can get 2 months for $1. Subscribe to the GoldandBlack.com on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And we appreciate you guys taking the time to watch and listen to this every week. I'm going to bring Brian on here. Brian was out a couple days this week as Derek interviewed him from his new beachfront home, and not his new beachfront home, but his beachfront location, I should say, this week in Florida. But Brian back in beautiful West Lafayette. Hard to beat that, isn't it? But Brian, I want to at least start this, and we'll talk a little bit of House decision and some of the stuff that may or may not be coming down with that. But the calendar turns to June, and we'll hit this more next week. But Purdue basketball has got some things going on. You've also still got some recruiting and AAU stuff that'll be going on throughout the summer. So give us a thumbnail of what to expect.
Yeah, my dog just heard you start this and started barking as soon as you started talking.
It's guaranteed to happen. But
you must have a very high-pitched shrill to you that can be heard by dogs all around the town.
I don't want to use that term dog whistle. So no, there you go.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. What?
Well, what's the calendar for June? Obviously, basketball is going to be starting up in a couple of weeks. There hasn't been a lot of news on the basketball front this week. It's finally a little bit quiet, but what do you have on the docket coming up?
Yeah, so Purdue enrolls. All their players come back to campus here for summer school. I believe they start workouts on June 11th. I don't know if they'll have everybody. Raleigh Burgess is hurt. Omer Meyer will be overseas with the Team Israel in those under-19 games. And if Daniel Jacobson makes Team USA in that event, he also will not be present on day one and relatively deep into June, I'd imagine. So it won't be Purdue's whole team. Other than that, you still have a pretty good chunk of your roster on campus starting workouts. And then when those other guys come in, you kind of commence a really important summer, kind of sprinkled around that. Purdue has its team camps on sprinkled all throughout June around those workouts. So they'll have some teams with some relatively interesting players coming. Not a ton of like really high end guys, but guys that Purdue is very interested in, that needs to lay eyes on some more. And then around that, late in June, you have the scholastic evaluation period for high school events. So the Indiana Basketball Coaches Association will have their top 100 clinic, where most of the top players, if not all the top players from the state in a bunch of different classes, will all congregate, I think, at Carmel this year. And Purdue will be at that. And the Charlie Hughes shootout late in the month, too, also at Carmel. We'll have pretty much every high school team in Indiana. So Purdue will be following around its guys in the state. Isaiah Hill in the 2027 class. For one, Kerryon Berry at Avon is a guy that they have to make a decision on in 2026. Jason Gardner Jr. and Cooper Zachary at Fishers are two guys Purdue's going to be watching closely. Gardner has an offer. Cooper Zachary does not yet. So those are a couple of guys that Purdue will be watching among in-state recruits. Purdue has gone more national in recruiting. That's been a big part of, Purdue's surge here the last 5 years. They've kind of expanded their recruiting scope. So the in-state stuff is not as big a deal as it used to be, but it is also their starting point. And when there's good enough players right down the road, as is the case with Isaiah Hill and some other guys here that they'll recruit moving forward, it's no less important than it used to be. Purdue just won't sign recruiting classes of all Indiana kids the way they would have been happy to do kind of earlier this decade even.
Yeah, and a credit maybe to where the program is, but there's also still a lot of talent in the state, as you guys that you just mentioned. When it comes to that, the light that's shining on me, where I'm recording, we have a skylight that I've yet to quite figure out. So I'm kind of, as the clouds go in and out, I brighten up, but that's part of my contract that I get the extra light to shine on me. So I apologize if that bothers anybody. I need to rethink where I record at this time in the afternoon. It only happens for about a half hour here, but it's happening now.
You can't be any more side lit than I am. So
yeah, well, you are side lit. I'm kind of half. I'm up hit, and my bald head gets a little bit of that as well. All right. Obviously, we're all, and you've talked extensively about the House settlement and some, maybe partly some of its irrelevance because everybody's moving forward because they have to. It has not been finalized yet. There's a lot of conjecture about why that's taking more time, whether it's just the need to get this right, and how much it really matters down the stretch. But it's still a discussion point because April 7th was the day we were talking about. This is all supposed to come to pass at the end of June 30th, I believe, or is it July 1, I guess. But what's your feeling about where this is and whether does it really matter much from your perspective?
It's almost anticlimactic. It's just a formality. If this somehow doesn't get approved, it's happening anyway. The SEC and the Big Ten are doing this. Like, do you think that the SEC and the Big Ten spent the last couple of months compiling their rosters, with revenue sharing on the table, only to just go tell all these guys, "Hey, sorry guys, it didn't get approved." So within the boundaries of state laws, they're doing this. The NCAA can't possibly, come at them and say, "Hey, you can't do this because our old rule book still applies." You cannot do that. So it's happening. It might be a more basic structure than what is actually needs approval. I think what hangs in the balance is whatever teeth this enforcement structure might have.
Right.
Which, as I've said many times, it's natural to have healthy skepticism about it being effective. But if the House settlement's not approved, then it's completely impotent. But it's happening one way or another. Purdue didn't go and recruit guys with a quote unquote salary framework only to have to take that back and say, "Sorry guys, the scholarship is enough for this year. We'll see what happens next year." It's just not happening. So the actual approval of the settlement is kind of a formality and really only matters to a point at this stage of the process. Now, the one thing I will say about this is the NCAA delegation and all of this screwed this up. This should have been a slam dunk deal, because Claudia Wilkin, I'm sure, came into this courtroom in the first place ready to rubber stamp this thing. And she is obviously going to the nth degree in terms of making sure she's doing the right thing here. This is, I believe, is the last case she's going to preside over in her career.
Right.
She wants to get this right. Good for her. That's exactly what she should be doing. But the NCAA left the door open because of these roster limits being so rigid. And the irony of that, I guess, I don't know if I'm using irony correctly there, is the kids this is going to affect, they already got cut in January. They already got told to transfer in December. So the collateral damage has already been incurred. But by the NCAA delegation, part of this coming in hot and saying these rosters have to go to this number right away instead of phasing in things gradually, allowing for the players and athletes who are on aid right now, on rosters right now, to naturally flush out of the system or naturally run their course. The NCAA is supposed to be about creating opportunity, not immediately ripping one out of an athlete's hands overnight. And the NCAA allowing that poison pill to stay in this proposal, they are getting what they deserve. The death knell in all of this all along could have been the reality that, and I will write a column about this as soon as this passes, the death knell in all of this could have been the fact that this might be good for an athlete, a specific athlete here and there, but athletes by and large, broadly speaking, this is not great for, because Olympic sports are going to get cut in places because of this. People are going to lose opportunities because of the give and take that has to come with the revenue having to go to the moneymakers to be competitive. So athletes in a broad sense, this is good for specific ones in specific sports. It is not a good thing for athletes broadly. And anything that could have led Claudia Wilkin to that conclusion could have blown this whole damn thing up. So this little wrinkle in all of this about a softball walk-on, who might have been aspiring to get their books paid for next year, a shred of aid getting told that they have to leave, Michigan State to go to Eastern Michigan or whatever. The face that puts on this whole thing basically begged for problems. And that is on the NCAA for not seeing that. I don't know what to call them. I'm calling them the NCAA delegation, the NCAA group that brought this proposal into the courtroom. They did not see the biggest landmine laying in the sand in all of this. And it is typical NCAA. This is what they, for generations, the reason they're in this position is they have never been able to get out of their own way. They have never been able to create a solution without causing 10 more problems. And here they thought they had a solution, and within that solution was this one problem that could have blown the whole thing up. And that's why this thing hasn't been passed yet.
Is it? And I think that is irony. There's some coincidence, but it's probably more irony in that. But what does that mean when you talk about the roster limits? Is it still football and that number, not knowing what that final number is going to be? And then obviously the other sports saying, this is how many you can have. Flesh that out just a little bit more.
Well, the proposal putting a hard number on roster limits is multifaceted. Coaches and schools don't trust one another. They think everyone else is cheating and are going to find ways around the rules, when in reality, a lot of those schools that are writing the rules that way are doing the same damn thing. They want those same advantages that they want to prevent other people from finding, those loopholes that they don't want other people to be able to find before they do. So the roster limits are in there because South Carolina doesn't trust Clemson to not figure out a way to get 30 more scholarship players on their roster, even though revenue sharing, NIL, all of this stuff, and the simple reality that players want to play make that unbelievably unlikely. Is a kid going to go to Clemson to not play? Is Clemson going to pay a player to come there and not play? No. But this is what these people think. They have to have these roster limits to make sure that somebody's not stashing 100 scholarship players like they used to do in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, when Alabama could sign every player in the Southeast to keep them away from Florida and Georgia and the northern schools. It's not feasible anymore. But that's what they think about. The other part of it is some schools, understandably, don't want to feed walk-ons. They don't want to pay to clothe and feed walk-ons. Fine, I get it. Money is tight nowadays. You got to pay the athletes, so there's only so much money to go around. If you don't want people to have unlimited walk-ons, leave that up to the school. What the hell is the big deal? You know, if Purdue basketball has 3 more walk-ons than Northwestern basketball, who cares? That is Northwestern's decision to not have those 3 walk-ons that Purdue is having. It makes no sense. Once again, you do not win games off of walk-ons, right? They're helpful. They're good for your program. But Sam King is not, I'm not picking on Sam King. I'm just picking his name out of a hat. Purdue walk-on Sam King is not the reason that Purdue is beating Michigan State to win the Big Ten. He's a good part of the program. He helps prepare the starters. It is a very theoretical impact quotient that those players have on actual outcomes. So why shouldn't Purdue be able to allow to have those, to be able to keep those guys around, as long as every school can only dress and play X number of players? Now, if you're Purdue and Northwestern, and Purdue can put 18 players in uniform for a game and play 18 players in a game, and Northwestern can only play 15, yes, competitive advantage. That needs to be avoided. But if Purdue can only dress 15 guys and Northwestern can only dress the 15 guys it has in its roster, what is the difference? Again, the NCAA has historically been about creating opportunities, and all of this stuff that they've put in here about these roster limits has been about kicking Chase Rail off the team, or kicking, Sam King off the team, although Sam King would be one of Purdue's. He's a bad example because Purdue's going to have its 15 spots with 12 scholarship guys. Purdue's not even going to fill the old barometer or the old 13. Threshold of 13 scholarships with 15 to give. They're going to keep walk-ons. That is everybody's prerogative. So leave it up to the schools. It's almost like the old argument of states' rights versus federal oversight. Leave it up to the schools. If Matt Painter wants to have 3 walk-ons out of his 15-man roster, fine. If Northwestern doesn't, fine. But give them the prerogative. As long as somebody doesn't have more active players in a game than somebody else, fine. That's just, it's why this was so hard to wrinkle out or smooth over the wrinkles of. It's just classic NCAA, that they had this all lined up like a golf ball on a tee for this to be just hit 400 yards and finalized, and they screwed it up.
Yeah, and thus we are still waiting. So,
but what we're waiting for is not is not suspenseful.
Yeah,
because all of this stuff, all the plans that have been laid here the last couple months about, Oscar Clough coming to Purdue with this salary. Nobody wants to use salary. This compensation package in mind. The cows are out of the barn in that, or I should say, in his case, the kangaroos are out of the prairie.
Yeah.
So what's done is done. This is happening one way or another, at least in terms of the compensation part of it, the revenue sharing part of it. It's the oversight part of it that, still has to be finalized. But I'm guessing Deloitte will get their billable hours one way or another, and they're going to be ample.
Yeah, and it's going to be more than $9.95 an hour, maybe $995 an hour, but not $9.95. All right, one last quick question. I had to get your quick take on, and I know you were traveling back to the Lafayette area on Thursday, but the schedule announced for football, you've got IU, Purdue on a Friday night of Black Friday of Thanksgiving week, a couple other night games. Any thoughts on that? Is it more just what we should be expecting this because that's the way television, the way it was last year? Purdue had several night games, but anything jump out at you with respect to that home and road television times? In fact, that 6 out of the 12 games have been determined.
Didn't even look at it. No idea. I saw somebody say something about IU being a night game and there being a basketball game the same day.
There is, and they're going to have to fix that.
Pretty cool for fans if they keep those.
They're going to have to change the start time though of the Purdue. Purdue's got Eastern Illinois or whoever it is that game, and because Purdue IU will be an 8 o'clock kick or at after 7. So I'm sure there'll be some logistical things but it will be a big day on that Black Friday. Instead of shopping,
I will say this: I used to, back when Purdue kind of fought the night game thing because of the lights issue. I kind of saw where they were coming from, that if TV is going to pay for lights, if they really want you on TV, sure, let them. And I kind of understood we'd prefer afternoon games because it's easier for people. I kind of got that. But now that Purdue's, been a marketable enough TV product where they're actually wanted for night games, I totally get it now. I get why night games are awesome. I get why people like them. They're fun. They're electric atmospheres, and the more you can be on TV in prime time, the better for your program. And TV runs everything nowadays. So it's been up to Purdue to become a product that's worthy of night game placement. They were back in the day when they weren't necessarily pleading to be on at night. Now the job is to get back into that role or back into that placement where you are on in prime time, and that could really elevate your program because people are watching you play, your name's getting out there, things like that. But I think the more significant piece of scheduling related matters for Purdue these days is just get those non-conference wins. People are banging on Indiana because they had a great year last year, but they haven't played anybody, and their MO still seems to be don't play anybody. Good for them. I mean, you build a program through winning, regardless of what those wins look like. And you never turn your nose up at a win when you went 1-11 the year before. You take baby steps. You get that 3-0, you get that 2-1 start. You get that 2-1 start to 3-0. You get that 3-0 start into some momentum. You start developing players through winning. You start feeling good about yourself. You start giving people reason to believe that, hey, better days are coming. And you start activating recruiting a little bit more through winning. And then if life comes at you fast in Big Ten play, so be it. But 1-11 is not a scar that heals over very quickly. And you never turn your nose up at wins if you're in a situation like Purdue is right now. And when you're in a situation like Indiana was in last year. Indiana is not in a place here. They went to the playoff last year, but they are not in a place here where overnight you're just going to be able to call somebody and have some big-time opponent come to your place and you'll go to their place next year. You keep doing what got you there, and you keep winning, and you keep trying to build off winning into more significant winning. Yes, Indiana beat no one last year. They didn't play anybody. They played Ohio State, and they got beat in that game. They beat Michigan when Michigan was at an all-time low, basically. Rich Rodriguez aside. But no, it's, Purdue should schedule a 3-0 start every year if they can. The Notre Dame thing, as big a deal as that has been historically for Purdue, as great a tradition as that has been, I don't know what it does for you anymore. The TV money's locked in. The brand appeal. I'm talking out both sides of my mouth because I just talked about the importance of being in top prime TV slots. But you don't need to get your head handed to you by Notre Dame every year.
Yeah, you got to be competitive. That's
the moment that Purdue came apart like a crunchy taco last year was, I think, probably when Notre Dame scored points. Let me back count here. 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, and 66. Did I skip over 65? I did. I did.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, you get the point. That season went sideways when Notre Dame put 66 points up in Ross-Ade Stadium. And I will tell you, I remember the athletic director sitting in that press conference, visibly agitated, as he should have been, because it wasn't just losing to Notre Dame the way they lost. It was the absolute non-competitiveness after halftime.
Yeah.
And
42, and that was 42 in the first half. Yeah. Yes.
When you put yourself in that position, now you want to build a program that shows up for those games or is equipped to compete in those games. But when you put yourself in those situations through your scheduling, Oregon State being a good example, Nevada being a good example, there is absolutely no reason Purdue should be flying to the West Coast to play games in non-conference play. You already have to do that in Big Ten play. Now, the Big Ten did Purdue a solid last year by not making them go out west because they were already playing at Oregon State. Right. So they got a favor last year in that regard and still went 1-11 because they lost that Oregon State game. Didn't show up for that Oregon State game either, but be that as it may, there's no shame in scheduling a 3-0 start if you're Purdue nowadays. The Big Ten is too hard. Wins are too hard to come by. You take them however you can get them, and then you apologize for it later. But don't apologize because winning is important.
Yeah, well said. All right, Brian, thanks so much. Always appreciate your wisdom and willingness to bring that to the fore. I want to thank our sponsors at GoldandBlack.com Saturday Simulcast. Of course, that's the Union Club Hotel and the Boiler House Prime Restaurant, part of the Pete Dye Clubhouse. It's a great spot to enjoy a cool, refreshing drink. If you wanted to go visit the bar's spectacular there. Great place for dinner. And if you're golfing, they've got a really nice lunch and snack area there too. So a great spot for that. And the Union Club have been a great sponsor of ours, and we appreciate them. And again, a reminder, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. And of course, you can leave a positive review and check out not only Gold and Black Radio, which typically airs on Tuesday, and GoldandBlack.com Saturday Simulcast, which is almost every Saturday throughout the course of the year. So have a great rest of your weekend, all, and we'll come at you next week with some more wisdom, hopefully, and we'll, as we get into the summer months here, there's still a lot to talk about in Purdue football, basketball, and recruiting. So have a great week, all, and we'll talk again soon.